Hello, everybody. This is your host, Brian Hunt, and welcome to another show of Risk On, Risk Off. Today, I'm very excited to have this gentleman on the show because I think many of you out there, we're talking and reading about AI, how it's going to change the world, how it might change your job, and maybe for the good, maybe for the bad. But take the fear out of it. What is the benefit of AI? How is artificial intelligence going to improve our lives, or maybe improve the decision-making process of organizations and companies as it respects to enterprise risk management? And sort of along that line, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine recently, talking about how they are trying to incorporate AI into this body of this large construction firm to help them make informed decisions with respects to products, procedures, and just try to be overall enhance their improvement and become more efficient. And again, it's one of these things that even today now people are using AI to help them write emails or process their emails in their inbox to become more efficient. And so there's a lot of tools and capabilities out there that I think we're only on the tip of. And so the following individual was brought to my attention by one of my guests, and I've been wanting to talk about AI for quite some time. So it's obviously very excited and grateful for the opportunity to introduce you to Mr. Stephen DeAngelis. Stephen, how are you, sir?
Hey, Brian, I'm doing great. Thank you.
Great to see you. I know you've been traveling the world the past couple of weeks and months, and we'll get into that. So, but it looks like in your background, it looks like it's a nice, pleasant day outside. So, Steve, before we get started, you and I look roughly about the same age. If you and I were playing a modified game of where in the world is Carmen Sandiego, where in the world is Stephen DeAngelis today?
Well, I'm in my house in Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Okay. And are you from that area before? Or is that where you grew up?
I'm originally from Westchester County, New York, okay, but I've lived in the Princeton, New Jersey, Bucks County, Pennsylvania area for 28 years now.
Oh, fantastic. Well, it looks gorgeous. It's we're starting to get into the hot season down here in Dallas, and we're starting to get steamy and humid. So I can tell you I would not be doing this show outside right now. So I'm very envious of you. So, Steve, I'm really fascinated, looking forward to this conversation because, again, AI is one of those topics I think a lot of people are starting to hear more and more about and want to see where the future might lay. But before we go down that road, Steve, I would just love to get a sense of your background and how your career sort of got you to where you are. So maybe we'll start off just, Steve, tell us a little bit about where you grew up as far as high school and everything.
Sure. So I grew up, like I said, in Westchester County, New York, a town called Scarsdale.
Yep.
I am a creature of the public school system. Luckily, when I went to public school, Scarsdale was a extremely good, competitive school system. So I went there through elementary school, junior high, and high school. Mm-hmm. And then I went to the American University's School of International Service, focusing on international affairs. And I have a degree in international affairs, focusing on Chinese American affairs, U.S. security and defense policy, and quantitative analytics. So that's a little bit of my college background.
Yeah. So then, obviously, going into college, you had a sense you wanted to work for the government, and obviously, as I ask these questions, if you can defer or not answer, then let me know. But so when you went to college and you had obviously a focus on international affairs, you can go back to high school. Were you a computer guy? Did you like to tinker with computer or coding or software, or was it something that just sort of came along the way?
No, I was always interested in. So when I grew up, it was at the beginning of the computer era, right? The personal computer era. So in the late 1970s, early 1980s, PCs were becoming dominant. I remember when I was in junior high school, I got the first Bomar brain calculator.
Oh, wow.
And, the questions then were, wow, if kids have a calculator, how are they ever going to learn mathematics, right?
Yeah.
Then a few years later, PCs came around and people say, wow, people have PCs, how are they ever going to learn mathematics? Because they have Lotus 1, 2, 3 to do the work for them. But no, I've always been fascinated about the application of data as it relates to problem solving. So the area that I focused on was international affairs, and the use of data to do quantitative analytics in international affairs.
Well, that's fascinating. So maybe you can give us a touch of what you can or can't, but a little bit this way. How is data in those early 8 years when you're out of college, you're starting to work for the government? How are you using data to make decisions? I mean, specifically.
Yeah. So let me just clarify. When I got out of college, I went to work for the Bank of Boston in Boston. I didn't know I thought I was going to be an investment banker. So I decided to go work for the Bank of Boston, and I was a strategic planner in the strategic planning group. And so there, my job, as the youngest guy in a team of people, was to build models on PCATs and compact 386 computers using Lotus 123.
Mm-hmm.
So it was building, bank acquisition models. How does Bank A acquire Bank B using a financial model that was built on Lotus 123.
Okay. So, Steve, actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I was having this conversation. Maybe I'll come back and circle back to a bigger conversation. But when Lotus came out, and then like Excel, and I'm a CPA, I remember people saying, "Oh, it's Excel's going to end up taking jobs away, or you're not going to need accountants anymore, or just you're going to need fewer people." But then I would argue, and I think it's time to show. No, it's not a question that people lost jobs, or maybe certain roles were lost, but people became more efficient and took on bigger roles, or could do more with less. I mean, so going back to your days then with Lotus, was that sort of like give you a sense as far as like when you're talking about AI and getting further in this conversation that it might change the dynamics, but it doesn't necessarily mean that jobs are going to go away.
No, it definitely changes the dynamic. It does. Like some jobs may go away, right? Yeah. But many jobs may open up, right? So there'll be new jobs, and people can do their current job more strategically. So what it has generally meant, from the time we use the Bomar brain calculator to the PC to very advanced models of today, the more routine and rote tasks get performed by the machine, which then allows the human to elevate their work to more strategic or higher order functions that need to be done in order to perform a richer, more robust role in the business process that's involved in analyzing data. So you get to interpret the analysis. Instead of spending all your time analyzing, you spend less time analyzing and more time interpreting the results of the analysis that's coming from the machine. Now, 40 years ago, it was very basic. Today, you have an artificial intelligence playing the role of a data scientist, playing the role of a coder, playing the role of a entry-level mathematician. But the business analyst or the user is able to take the output and then make more reasoned and informed choices based upon decisions based upon the analysis that the machine is coming up with.
Okay, so I know we're going to circle back to this, but since you brought it up with the Lotus, I want to jump right on. So let's circle back to Bank of Boston. You thought you were going to be an investment banker, but obviously things changed. What was the next step in your career in that evolution?
So the next step in my career is I got involved in politics a little bit. I started to build models to help understand how voters behaved based upon the analysis of data. Then I went out and formed a strategy company in Washington, D.C., ran a strategy company advising governments and political candidates how they could respond to in two cases how to respond to natural disasters, which went very, very well. But again, it was a lot of it was analyzing data. How do we optimize the way for a region of country, like Florida or Louisiana, when they responded to hurricanes, or the Virgin Islands? How do you respond to a catastrophic weather event? How do you dynamically respond to those catastrophic events, and how do you build resiliency versus redundancy into the systems of government? So I started to do that work as a consultant, and then one of my clients was a specialty chemicals company in the Virgin Islands, or in New Jersey where I lived, but also wanted to buy an operation in the Virgin Islands. So At 32, I became the CEO of a specialty chemicals manufacturing company in the Virgin Islands. Ran that for a number of years. Then sold that back to my portion of that back to the parent company in New Jersey, and then formed a supply chain management firm in the dot-com era. Ran that for a number of years. Exited that successfully prior to the dot-com market crash, and then started Enterra in 2001 as a company to build structural resiliency into both initially governmental agencies and critical infrastructure, but then as we've evolved into commercial operations today.
So, Steve, I've had many entrepreneurs and business owners come on my show because one of the biggest risks you could ever do is start your own firm. So I'm curious, what was the drive, the impetus to start Enterra? What made you decide I want to create this firm, and what was your mission?
Well, so I'm a New Yorker, right? Yeah. And we got hit in September 11th, and the normal response was, how do we help out and respond? I had just sold my last company about a year prior, and I said, we have a connect the dots problem. The government had identified we couldn't connect the dots to get an adequate perspective on the terrorists. So, and in my last firm, the biggest innovation was the advanced information integration work that we had done to bring together structured and unstructured data in the supply chain together so we could perform analysis to optimize supply chain functionality. So I said to the government, you have a connect the dots problem. I know how to connect the dots. And that led to me forming a government contracting business that had a thread of work in the national security arena going forward for 15 years from 2001 to 2016, but also a quasi-academic pathway where I became a scientist at Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute, which is a federally funded research and development center that's administered by Carnegie Mellon. And I built a methodology called Enterprise Resilience Management, which was a best practices method for diagnosing and creating systemic methods to build resiliency into critical infrastructure and critical systems.
So, Steve, let's talk about that. So, let's maybe set the stage for what Enterra is doing. AI is a big word.
Yep.
So how would you help explain people who want to get a little bit more about understand what artificial intelligence is, as far as, what is AI and what is it not? Do people, I think you use that term around a lot, but can you help us explain where we stand right now in the world of AI?
Sure. Artificial intelligence we're at the precipice, Brian, of probably the most consequential technological innovation that man has faced since fire, if you want to think of it like that. The possibility of having an artificial general intelligence, a form of intelligence on Earth that is superior to that of a human, is probably the most far-reaching thing that has happened to humanity. I say since fire to try to give the connotation of how consequential it will be. But AI allows you to do any number of things, whether it be performing rote tasks, right, performing digital assistant-like tasks that you had mentioned, but also more structurally to have a machine reason in a human-like fashion, be able to perform analysis and make a decision, learn from that, and then evolve that learning such that AI can, like I said, play the role of human.
Steve, you're buffering out right now, so hopefully you'll be able to get the connection back here in a second. But for everybody there who's out watching, This is Risk On, Risk Off, and we're having a
Brian,
conversation. Yeah, I'm here. Let's just pause for 1 second. It's actually give me an opportunity. Yes. Steve, you got me?
I could hear you the whole time. I'm sorry.
Okay. Now you're buffing out there for a second. So let's just pause and we'll rewind what you were saying for just 1 second. But so everybody who's watching, this is Risk On, Risk Off. We're having a conversation with Steve DeAngelis. If you would like to submit a question to Steve and bring it to his attention, look at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You're going to see a picture of me. It says add a comment. Please go ahead and type in your question, and I can bring it to Steve's attention. So, Steve, why don't we just rewind the clock there for about 60 seconds and you buff it out. Let's try to pick up that conversation again.
Sorry about that. So AI, like I was saying, AI has the ability to perform human-like reasoning functions, right? It is increasing its maturity in what it can perform as the large language models of the generative AI portion of AI build, but it is a very, very powerful capability that can replicate human-like reasoning and decision making, and in some cases exceed the capabilities of a human. And it is rapidly evolving, as you see in the news and if you see in everyday life today. But definitionally, AI, if you want to think of it, has sort of three components. It has generative AI that you're familiar with today with ChatGPT and various other large language model tools that are in the marketplace today. You have symbolic AI, which used to be called expert systems, which reason using technologies like inference reasoners and ontologies. And then you have machine learning, which generates knowledge through the algorithmic analysis of data. So three large components of AI, broad components. There are sub components in each category: Gen AI, symbolic AI, and machine learning. And they're all sort of forms and functions of each other with mathematics as the underlying engine of all of them. But it is a rapidly evolving field that, like I said, will have consequential impact to the way that we live and perform our jobs today.
Well, Steve, actually, we have a question that's come in, but for some reason it's not connected, but I can read it out loud. This following question comes from Davis Morales Weaver. He's got a question. The future of AI holds incredible potential for innovation. How can we ensure that it enhances our strategies?
Well, I mean, interesting question. We can't. To be honest with you, we can't. And wish I could say we could, but you can use when you say our strategies. When I say we can't, that means we as a species, we can't predict how it's going to happen. Yeah. You could very well use AI to help predict tactical strategies in your personal life, or tactical strategies in your company. So you can build models that help simulate potential strategic plans, run all the probabilistic scenarios that are possible for your business or for your personal objective function, your personal goal. And then the AI can help inform what the best strategy might be to obtain the goal state that you have articulated in your strategy.
Well, Steve, actually, along the lines, because like a little bit of prep of this, but also just personally, I'm a background CPA and finance. I was running some models through Claude, giving it, wanted to do some analysis of potential portfolios using like 3 different types of mutual funds and a certain percentage, and it came out and did an analysis. Then I actually took it for the first time. I was like, well, you know what? I ran and said, okay, run a Monte Carlo analysis on this. And I was actually impressed with what I got back from Claude on the Monte Carlo analysis. And so I could, at least from my personal, from what you just said there, I'm trying to implement AI in these platforms to try to enhance my strategies for retirement to ensure that it's going to work. Sure. My money's not going to go out. And it's and to that point, it's like, and not to say it's there yet, but like Monte Carlo simulators, I'd have to like look around, like probably pay some money and get a software package to do that. But I got something relatively, which is fit my needs for this point on Claude for nothing, which I thought was kind of impressive. So
it's beyond kind of impressive, Brian. It's very impressive. I mean, when you think about the technological capability for Claude to be able to ingest a algorithm, be able to know enough about what a Monte Carlo analysis is to understand how to adequately inform the model to execute and be able to help you interpret the results as supportive of a strategy. I mean, that's really sophisticated for a computer to do, right? It's a very sophisticated thing for a machine and software to be able to run. So, like I said before, the geometric increase in the power and capabilities of artificial intelligence is going to dramatically increase, not year by year, not month by month, but week by week. These capabilities are dramatically increasing in form and function every single month. So I think that it is you're going to be able to use AI to help prove out strategies, to help run efficiently n number of scenarios that are the probabilistic space that you would need to prove out in order to test the veracity of a strategy. And that would usually take you a very long time by hand to do, with the potential of making error along that pathway as a human.
So, Steve, obviously, let's maybe delve into a little bit as far as obviously your firm is out there providing this in real time to large firms. I imagine most of your firms are probably Fortune, 500, 100 firms.
Yeah.
And without maybe giving names, unless they give you permission, can you maybe explain to us, like, say, I could see maybe the CFO's going, man, I really want to make AI more ingrained in our operations to help us make decisions or hit our KPIs and become more efficient. So maybe explain, or maybe give some case studies or examples. How is AI being used by some of these large firms to again make themselves more efficient, more profitable, to be more streamlined? What are some of the things that people are able to do with your platform or AI going forward?
So, for example, you're able to today use an artificial intelligence to understand what we call the butterfly effect, if you want to think of it.
Okay.
You have various things that go on in a marketplace on a daily basis. So, you probably are very familiar with climate change related effects on crop yield, right? So a real life example is you have companies that manufacture food products. Many of those food products are subject to climate change affecting crop yield, right? So climate change oftentimes has a negative effect on crop yields, right? And so companies have had to adjust their supply chain to meet the emergent challenges that climate change has reaped upon yields of crops. So think about things like cocoa prices in chocolate, or coffee bean prices in the coffee industry, and so those have a cascading effect on the value chain. When you layer in the effect of things like tariffs or other trade related problems, you layer on, or previously we had layered on, COVID related supply chain challenges, right? So you have an area where you've got a lot of uncertainty coming from pandemic, inflation, climate change, tariff. All of that drives a cascade to the ordinary plan that goes along the value chain of a business. Then at the same time, as a result of those supply chain related challenges, you also have consumer preference challenges, changing. Inflation changes the way people buy products. Working from home affects the way people prepare food. They eat out less, they prepare more at home, right? So the consumer behavior has changed. So you've got a massive time of change where on the one hand, you have supply chain challenges. The other hand, you have changeable consumer preferences. And then you have the need to have
Steve, buffering again.
what is everyday price? I'm sorry. Can you hear me? What is the everyday price?
Yeah.
What is the everyday price of the product? What is the temporary price incentive that you want to offer to incentivize that person to buy that product? So what AI does, it allows you to calculate the interactive effects that go on across that value chain integrate the results of optimization engines, and then so you want to be able to say, okay, if we have supply chain challenges like this and we have changeable consumer preferences like that, how do we use the levers of revenue growth, trade promotion, pricing, market mix to adjust the value chain in order to optimize the way you deliver the right product to the right consumer at the right price, taking into account the supply chain challenges, taking into account changeable consumer preference, but also having the manufacturing firm be able to realize the target profit margin that they want to realize along with their retail partner. So it's a very complicated dance that has to be orchestrated.
No, I mean,
you do.
No, Steve, I think you touch on something which goes into a bigger picture I've had conversations with on the past with even Tom Barnett to this extent. You made allusion to it, and if you can expand upon it, I'd appreciate it, especially if you can, based on your client, your contacts. But you made the comment respects to climate change in crops, and there's been some documentation articles you've been seeing about. I've seen things are getting hotter and warmer, longer period hot, like here in the South, where drought might be the issue, or heat, where crops that were doing well down here may not be the case, 20 years from now. But as things progress, as the winters maybe are not as severe as in places like Michigan or Ohio or Minnesota, that those parts of the world might be more hospitable or convenient to grow certain types of crops that you couldn't do further south. Is that an example? I imagine there's a modeling going on that's making some of these firms start buying up land in the Midwest, no anticipation that in the future they're going to probably want to use those for crop generation.
Well, I think so. So Tom and I are friends, as you probably know. But the the concept of climate change driving migration shifts away from the equator, north and south, right, is opening up new areas for farming in the northern parts of the world. So Canada, Greenland, others, right, where you previously could not grow crops, you can start to grow crops in those regions, given climate change's effect on northern latitudes temperatures. However, in the equatorial, in the band that goes around the equator, those are becoming more problematic as temperatures increase for certain crops, like, for example, West African cocoa, right? Crop yields have lessened there as a result of a mix of problems, climate being one of them, underinvestment in farming being another, lack of modern farming techniques being a third component. But the notion is that as climate change shifts populations, shifts migrations of people and species north and south and higher up in elevation, right, higher up in altitude, then you will see new parts of the world open up for agriculture, while some of the other parts of the world will yield less unless they're able to be adaptive to that climate change.
So, Steve, one of the things, obviously you're out there, you're presenting or talking to some CEO or CFO who brought you in to talk about this, but I'd be curious, you could say, what are some of the most common misconceptions business leaders have about implementing cognitive technologies? I mean, do they come in to talk to you, think, well, you could do this for me, but it turns out it's really can't, or it's actually another path?
I think the biggest challenge to the use of artificial intelligence is not actually the AI, right? It is the integration of data to fuel the artificial intelligence, right? So the long pole in the tent, whether it be for advanced analytic systems or ERP systems or other major system integrations at large companies, is getting the data organized and harmonized effectively. But beyond that, it is the workflows and the ways of working needing to be changed within the company in order to anticipate the use of the artificial intelligence. It really hasn't been much of, oh, can it do this for me, or can it do that for me, or I thought it could do this magically, but it can't do that. It really is people have had very practical and measured approaches to what AI can do. I think what we have seen are practical challenges of getting data to the AI, so it can analyze it, but also the ability of companies to change the way that they work quickly enough to keep up with the pace of technological change. So that is a major challenge at organizations today.
So, Steve, at this point, when you're talking to clients, what are the functions internally that maybe are most maybe say or most receptive to AI change, or do you see the benefit quickly? Like by that, whether it be procurement, logistics, human resources, budgeting and planning. Where are some of at this point sort of the low hanging fruit when it comes to
so there's a lot of low hanging fruit, Brian, in each of the areas of the company. So let's say that you're in the human resources arena and looking at how to optimize people's engagement in a business. So having effective, intelligent digital assistants can make people's lives more productive. So there's a productivity gain to be made on an individual level within the company. There is massive ability for AI to help companies understand how to manage that butterfly effect across the value chain that I had mentioned earlier. That's absolutely critical for us to be able to do, because there are so many interactions that happen in that area, that if we don't manage that effectively, it'll be a very, very difficult um, thing to do fast enough using traditional techniques. So AI can run that analysis faster, more efficiently, with more accuracy than humans could do by themselves within a decision cycle. And then there are opportunities, great opportunities in the manufacturing and logistics processes to make them more efficient. But the biggest area that companies are focusing on today is how do we use AI to drive growth and profit versus necessarily how to look at to save money and to become more efficient. Where we find a lot of interest with our clients is obviously how do we drive growth and profit versus how do we save money with AI.
So can you maybe give us an example? I mean, how AI can help with growth and profit? Is it by using all the different factors and data they were able to come up with what they think is the ideal price point to drive growth? Is it using information to say go into certain markets that are more susceptible to others for maybe a new entry come in? Because I'm fascinated by that aspect, but I can't imagine all the different variable points and data points that come into that.
So, for example, we work very heavily in an area called revenue growth optimization, right?
Okay.
Which means how do you use the levers of commercial investment, pricing, everyday price, trade promotion, which is the temporary price incentive, to giving a temporary reduction in price in order to incentivize the purchase of the product, price pack architecture, which is what is the packaging size of the product, media mix, how do we use advertising and the levers of media to make individuals aware of their product and to build brand equity. So when you look at all of those levers of revenue growth, the question is how do you use those levers most effectively to drive consumers to buy the right product, your product, at the optimal price point with the right temporary price incentive at the right packaging size in order to sell as much of the product as possible at the target profit margin.
So at this stage, I mean, obviously things are going to AI. It seems like it change every month or week or something. New announcements going to come down the pipeline. But from where you stand right now, where do you see the biggest opportunities for cognitive computing to transform industries in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, 3 to 5 years is a long time in
the Fair enough.
but look, I see companies building resiliency, not only into their company, but building resiliency into their ecosystems. So given the amount of change that we are facing today, we live in a sort of a very brittle, fragile, anxiety-driven, non-linear, right, complex world. So the ability to have companies and the ecosystems that they operate in. Think about a large consumer, a large manufacturing company, their retailers and the consumers that they sell to, and their supply network and their manufacturers all integrated on an ecosystem. That ecosystem needs to be structurally resilient to challenges in climate, shifting migration patterns of individuals, tariff-related challenges, geopolitical risk, other uncertainty that face the world today. So I think that AI can be the almost a necessary platform to integrate those companies that play a role in a business ecosystem to be as resilient and agile as they can to navigate what is a very uncertain marketplace that people operate in.
So, Steve, you bring up a good point, which I would love to get your point. So, I think you probably heard the term this like else. Like in the past 20 years, we've definitely, or 15, this polycrisis environment where there are so many things that have come over. Great financial crisis, pandemic, tariffs, political violence, instability, even in the United States. Now with the growth of AI, how is AI able to help organizations make decisions or plan when there are so many things that seem like they've come out of the woodwork all at one time that we're playing in this, so many different variables going on at one time? Is like, that's the fascinating part as far as I can see the benefit, like, how you might help make decisions, but then also the data and the rules, I guess, you come in seem like they're constantly changing because there's always something like now there's some new thing like a tanker gets stuck in the Suez Canal or whatever. There's a lot of things go on that go bump in the middle of the night that could throw your plans out the window.
Sure. So look, we have a solution that we call EATRS, which is Enterra's dynamic resiliency system.
Okay.
And what EATRS does is it posits that we can't predict every bad thing that's going to happen, Brian. We can't predict black swan events, right?
Yeah.
Or else there wouldn't be black swan events.
Yeah.
But you want to get so good at responding that you can mitigate a risk or exploit an opportunity better than your competitors can.
Mm-hmm.
So the notion of when we first built our resiliency methods after September 11th at Carnegie Mellon, the notion was redundancy was not adequate. It wasn't good enough just to have backup systems to the backup systems. You needed to get so good at responding structurally that you could use essentially judo, right? You could take the power of the change and use that force to respond so quickly and so accurately that you could, like I said, mitigate the risk or exploit an opportunity better than the competitor can. Because anytime that something happens, like you just described, there are winners and losers in that marketplace, right?
Correct.
So the goal is the companies or the governments that are the most resilient have the ability to be the consolidators in industries where their less than competitive brethren can't respond as quickly. So
go ahead, sorry.
No. So what you do to make that happen is you need to be able to build optimization and simulation capabilities that can predict all the probabilistic likely scenarios that you can possibly run into, pre-plan them, and then start to detect data signals, right? Signals from the noise, if you want to think of it like that.
Yeah.
And so today, our systems, our business wargaming systems, detect hundreds of thousands of market signals a month for clients. So we can see as far upstream as possible when there looks like something is about to happen. We start to see the indicators of things starting to happen. And once we start to see that, we can profile that pattern and then say, here is the pre-run plan that we have made to execute. And then once we start to see the specific data, we can re-optimize or re-simulate that plan to adjust to the market conditions that we're detecting signals that might be coming. So think of it as, when I say signal, think of it as like sonar and radar. You want to be able to see the horizon, right?
Yep.
Beyond the horizon, if you start to see oh, there's enemy bombers attack coming at you. The question is, what do you do? You see a hurricane coming at you. What do you do, right? So you put in place the planning function that best addresses that pattern of signal, where you have dimensionalize what class of problem it is, and then you execute the play that you've run, but while tweaking the analysis based on these specific signal that you're catching that day. So it's a lot of the AI can run those models and simulations
Mm-hmm.
at the speed of the market. So, for example, in revenue growth optimization that I mentioned earlier, the
Yeah.
revenue growth process that the best companies would take 3 weeks with a team of 10 people to run scenarios in order to replan a large company's product offering against their retailers in a region. We
Mm-hmm.
could do that in a fundamental optimization in an hour, and we can run a simulation based on the optimization in 45 or 50 seconds. So that is being able to plan at the speed of the market.
Steve, you brought up something that really hit home for me, because my most of my career is pretty much risk management, insurance, and enterprise risk management, and with that comes business continuity planning, and it's sort of one of the, I've had the good fortune of having Juliet Kayyem on the show a couple of times, and she's established background as far as national security, teaches at Harvard. And one of the principles of being in this modern world is everyone wants to be more resilient, but part of being resilient is it's not just necessarily having the plan; it's also having the training and the people sort of know how to roll. So that like Eisenhower said, it's like in the day the plans don't really mean anything because nothing ever goes to plan, but it's the training in that tribal mindset that's been developed amongst the staff to know how to react. Yeah, it may not be exactly what you thought it was going to be, but it might sound similar to it. And so that's where I think your modeling comes home as far as risk management is concerned, as far as looking at potential variables that could be there. Maybe not be exactly like that, but it is bringing that sense of resiliency into an organization so that they can adapt versus where your competition may not be able to.
Well, to be resilient, you have to think about it as people, process, technology, and data, right? You need the whole stack in order to be able to be resilient. And in addition to people, process, technology, and data, in today's world, we include agents with people. So if you think about people and intelligent agents that function in an agentic framework, the AI agentic framework, you need your agents working in harmony with individuals and the business processes to be able to react to the analysis that we give them. So, for example, if we detect that there's a risk factor coming and we plot a really good plan to mitigate a risk and exploit a market opportunity that could be identified by our competitors not being able to act upon it. If the humans in the system can't react fast enough or aren't trained to react, Brian, they won't, the analysis is only so good if you can't execute it.
Correct.
So training the individuals to also be resilient and training the agents to be resilient in a human machine combination is where the rubber hits the road, and we're working on those things today with clients.
Wow. So for everybody who's maybe joined late to the show, this is again Risk On, Risk Off. We're having a conversation with Stephen DeAngelis, CEO and founder of Enterra Solutions. If you have a question for him, please look to the bottom right-hand corner. You're going to see my picture next to the oval. Add a comment. Please type in a question. As long as you keep it clean, I'll bring it to Steve's attention. So, Steve, I got you for another 15 minutes, and this conversation I could keep on going for hours, but I want to be conscious of your time. So let's try to make a couple of lightning rounds here. So as you think about where you are now and the clients you're working with, where would you think are the sectors that are the most ripe for disruption with respect to cognitive computing?
Well, like I said before, in every sector, there are dramatic areas where you can change. So, for example, in life sciences, you'll have dramatic change in drug discovery and drug formulation based upon AI's advances. And then when you add quantum computing's advances in a few years, that will fundamentally change the way in which we do drug formulation, drug discovery, personalized medicine, right? Can be done very in a way that we cannot do it today.
Mhm.
In the area of health sciences, you'll be able to do personalized clinical and drug pathways to individuals at speed, right, at scale.
Mhm.
So, and in the consumer products industry, being able to navigate this rapid change and build new models for new realities, new consumer realities, given the changing global landscape that Tom and I talk about oftentimes, right?
Yeah.
And so in every single industry, there will be a handful of foundational cases that will move the needles of companies greatly in that industry sector. So, like I said, I think it's not limited to any one industry or any one sector. It is within every vertical market. There will be direct applications that will be, like the triage of ones that will be worked on first because they yield the highest amount of impact,
Mhm.
given the evolution of technology, and they'll keep evolving as technology increases.
Wow. So, Steve, this the next question is sort of double pointed. So, obviously, you travel around quite a bit. I think you were just in the Middle East recently. You probably
Mhm.
consulted with firms all over the country and the world. Maybe at a high level, or macro level, can you maybe give us a sense of where you think, whether it be certain parts of the world or certain countries, where this whole migration to AI is actually being really, people are really on the avant
Sure.
garde as far as where this is going?
Well, look, there are three, in my opinion, there are three or four major centers of gravity for artificial intelligence today.
Okay.
There's the United States, right, where our engineers in across the United States, whether it be Silicon Valley, Texas, the East Coast of the United States with IBM, are investing heavily in AI. There are China, as you know, is investing heavily in AI. And in the Gulf region, in the Middle East, I just came back from Abu Dhabi, where the White House announced with the Abu Dhabi government a $3 trillion multi-year investment into artificial intelligence. And if you look at that investment in the Emirates, combined with investments in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere in the Gulf, you see those as another major force of AI investment. And then, um, lastly, and related to United States, work in England in artificial intelligence. So if you think about the three massive buckets of where
Mhm.
AI investment is going to be made: China, United States, the Middle East. With U.S., China, then the Middle East in that sort of cascading size.
So, question that's related to this, and it's not directly AI, but maybe there's AI using the solutions for it. Because, like here in Texas, we've had seen a lot of growth and people coming in here. We've seen a lot of construction
Mm-hmm.
and in new homes, whatever. And also with that, it's a lot of building and coming down here respects to data centers for AI.
Yep.
That requires a lot of power, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
energy. And there's been, even though we're very proud of our energy in here, our oil here. Um, I think it's fair to say that our energy infrastructure is outdated as respects to what the potential demand is going to be, especially with AI and the
Mm-hmm.
power it's required to run AI. Where do you see in your mind the Achilles heels, pitfalls, whatever how you want to describe it, as far as if we're going to truly adapt AI, then obviously that means a lot of data centers running off a lot of racks, and then someone's got to power it. What's the potential concerns there?
Look, the concerns are that China is manufacturing electric capacity at a huge amount more than the United States.
Hmm.
They're building more electric generation facilities by an order of magnitude than we are in the U.S. So if you want to think of it as pure infrastructure, right, you are correct. Where you need to build massive data centers to fuel the LLMs, those data centers need to be fueled with electricity. We are being out engineered, out developed in scale, right?
Hmm.
Not in quality of technology, but in scale by China. So I think that one of the constraints is, like you pointed out, the ability to generate modern, efficient power generation capabilities to fuel the emergent needs of massive data centers that are being made. And these are hundreds of billions of dollars of investments, Brian. It's not little amounts of money. These are huge amounts of money, right? Being invested. So you have to think of it almost as the infrastructure side of AI. Like AI had, a lot of people think of AI as the, sexy artificial intelligence, the software, the neural net, right? But there is a massive infrastructure side of AI that will be, quite frankly, a net job creator. So people say, well, AI is going to replace a lot of jobs. It is going to replace a lot of jobs, but it's also going to spawn a huge amount of infrastructure jobs and other jobs. So if I wasn't inclined to go to college, I would be an electrician. Electricians are going to get paid a lot of money and have an endless stream of work because it's going to, it's going to be the full employment plan for electricians and trade folks.
No, I'm glad you said that because my clients are predominantly construction firms, GCs and subcontractors, and there's not enough good talent, especially for what's going on now, but it's coming out of the pipeline, and it's not easy work,
and it's highly skilled talent too, right?
Yeah,
it's not like you're putting electric line in your house, right? You're building things that are massively powerful. So the skill level of those folks is going to have to be enhanced at scale, right? Which is, it's going to be good for that sector.
Amen. No, and then plumbing on top of that, it's you need chilled water and services at these plants. No, absolutely. So coming up towards the end here, I got a couple of questions for you. Then because I read a book recently from, I'm going to butcher his name, but you probably know better than I do. Mustafa Suleyman, The Coming Wave, about AI. And there was a segment in there that really caught me off guard and maybe sort of like from a risk manager, I go, oh Lord, talking about how, especially with AI, you can conceive of someone out there who gets with the basic fundamentals of, biochemistry, gets access to a CRISPR unit, which is not much bigger than a big desk you can put in your garage, that it could conceivably with that, someone with using AI come up with the means and methods and the, the basic pattern for a pathogen that no one has ever heard about or seen about, which could be devastating. And that is sort of like, in my mind, one of the worst, sort of like the double-edged sword as far as what things could go wrong with AI. So if I was to sit and stop and think, Steve, out all your history and your knowledge of AI and where we're going in the future, if I was to stop and ask you, what's that one thing that keeps you up at night when you think about now or the near future of AI? What gives you the big concerns?
AI, well, in two areas. One, in a more ordinary fashion, AI generating misinformation or disinformation in our everyday lives, right? It's more of an insidious type of low-grade misinformation, disinformation. How do we weaken the United States by polarizing us, like driving us apart as a people? We have to be smarter than that, and we have to know that bad guys will use AI to try to do that, right? And then more catastrophically is AI getting a hold of weapon systems, or AI getting hold of critical infrastructure and turning critical infrastructure into weapon systems.
And Steve, on the last show, I had Tom Thakkar he's from New York Times author. He's one New York Times columnist talking about international affairs, and then he's with George Washington now. And he talked about, the one thing that's come out of the Ukraine war is the amount of rapid adaptation in use of drones, and just like how many people, like the percentage of the actual death and mortality on the battlefield as a result of drones was mind-boggling. We actually said it.
Yes.
And then you take what I understand the future as far as drones, if you mirror that with AI technology, and then they're having these drones having independent decision making as far as what's a target, what's not a target, when I can kill the target. That I got to be honest, man, that seems like, the worst case scenario, like Terminator, didn't seem like it's too far down the road.
Well, so what you're finding in Ukraine is the large experiment in the use of drone technology and autonomous systems to create sort of a battlefield hellscape, if you want to think of it like that. And the and the use of drones and artificial intelligence and any number of other autonomous systems, Brian, you want to just categorize it in a very big bucket, right? It depersonalizes the catastrophic effect of war a little bit. And I think it is hard for people to imagine, right, swarms of micro drones coming at them, right? So the entire way that we wage war, which we think of as a soldier with a rifle, right, or a tank, or a large ship, right, or an airplane coming at you that you could see and you can rationalize in your mind today from your experience or seeing it on television, in the news, or watching movies, right? The more of the Terminator like metaphor that you used is happening in the real world today in Ukraine, and I would imagine that the major powers are observing that and trying to take lessons learned from that. So look, with any new technology, there are things you could do positive with it, in the positive, and things you could do negative with it. I think that the complexity, however, and the potentiality for lethal harm from very small systems where you don't have to be launching an ICBM out of a Minuteman III silo in North Dakota and have the entire Air Force and back you to figure out how to make that happen effectively, right? Versus a super empowered individual with a drone with a pathogen, as you mentioned, right? It fractures. It makes more problematic the resiliency space, because now you've got a much more fragmented, much more lethal, much more potentially lethal at a small scale with many of these things, harder to defend against, harder to anticipate where it's coming from, right? Threat environment. So, I'm sure you've talked to people like you mentioned Julia Kayyem and others who are much more sophisticated at this than I am. But from the computer science point of view, it is definitely within the reasonable level of risk that you would want to think about, because these are things we're seeing play out in Ukraine now. I mean, today there was a story in the news about Ukraine and Russia's ability to use micro drones to go deep inside each other's countries to bomb cities, population centers, but also to do targeted assassinations and targeted other bad behaviors, right? And if you look at that, the cascading effect of events that would happen from one super empowered individual using a drone with a weapon on it to either kill somebody, that causes a ripple effect, a cascading perturbative effect of negative consequences, and maybe causes one country to use a tactical nuclear weapon or something else. The precipitating nature of that causes a chain reaction, I think, is very, very challenging.
No, just say the least. And now you're making me more scared than I already was. so, Steve, thank you so much. Before we finish up, let's end up on a light note. So, Steve, when you're not working with artificial intelligence in large companies, what are you doing in your free time?
So I like to read. I like to read. I like to travel. Right.
Okay.
I like to hang out with my family. So all those things are
okay. So top 2 books that you'd recommend right now.
So I would recommend Escape from Freedom by Eric Fromm.
Okay.
Which is a really great book to read. And then I would recommend a book called The Price of Peace It is about John Maynard Keynes in the interwar period leading forward. I think that, reading books about the interwar period between World War I and World War II will give good lessons to things we're looking at today in society.
Okay. And so we're officially in the summer season, and people are thinking about do some trips. So what are your top 3 spots for trips?
So, having lived in New York, I enjoy going to New England. So going to Maine and places like that where the weather is beautiful. I do enjoy, however, going to Europe when I travel on business, and not for the summer season. But I got to tell you, the amount of change in architecture, modern architecture that's going on in Abu Dhabi and Dubai is fascinating. Looking at the most, and in China too, but the most incredible architectural, the interesting skyscrapers going up in the world that I have seen in the last 10 years are going up in that region. So a tremendous amount of change there, but not for the summer.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. I'll avoid it. No, those have been on my bucket list. I mean, place I want to hit, and I've had a good fortune to travel out to most of the country in the world, but haven't hit Middle East. So it's been on my list. So awesome. Steve, thank you so much for your time. This is a phenomenal conversation. I could have kept going another hour, but I want to be cognizant of your time. So.
I apologize for the internet access. I mean, I have to talk to my provider, but I'm supposed to have the fastest service that I could buy, so I apologize for that.
Don't worry, Steve. Like I said, my life of risk and insurance and everything goes as planned. So you overcome and adapt. I think we're able to overcome it. So thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
So that's another edition of Risk On, Risk Off. And then obviously, artificial intelligence is one of those topics I think it's permeating everybody's life, and everybody's got a lot of questions on it. Really appreciate Steve's input, respects to where we are, where we're going in this field. I think at the end of the day, it's a technology. And like any technology, it has potential for be a tool, but also that tool can be used as a weapon. And whether or not it's going to take your job, and you're sitting there watching this, I don't know. But it will also create new jobs. But kind of like the old adage, if you're thinking artificial intelligence is like a lion that's chasing its prey, it's like, well, you don't have to be the fastest guy. You just need to be faster than the slowest guy. And so maybe that, as we all learn going forward, working AI, trying to adapt AI for our personal use and benefit. Even myself, I try to incorporate more and more respects to my writing, and also, like I mentioned on the call, was even starting to use it as far as Monte Carlo simulations on Claude. So it's either adapt or die. So good luck out there. I hope you enjoy this. And if you can, if there's a certain topic or individual you'd like to see on this show, please let me know. Until next time. Bye.